Welcome to Calm Buddha. Settle in comfortably. Nothing is required from you now. Tonight's story will begin gently. Tonight's story is called The Cup That Waited for Steam. Rain moved down the mountain in long, patient lines, slipping from the tiled roof and falling to the stones below in a steady rhythm. The sound reached into a small wooden room near the edge of the temple grounds, softening the air with a gentle hush. Clouded light filtered through paper screens, turning the walls into pale, muted panels. The room seemed to hold its breath, shaped more by silence than by anything inside it. A low wooden table stood near the center of the floor, its surface worn smooth by many evenings of quiet use. On it rested a single clay cup, empty, its rim uneven where a small chip had once broken away. The cup leaned slightly toward the nearest screen, where the faint gray light of the rainy sky pressed through. Inside the hollow of the cup, darkness gathered in a small, still pool. The mind may rest now. Beside the cup lay an iron kettle, dark from years of fire and steam. Its curved sides reflected only the dimmest trace of the room, a soft blur of wood and shadow. The handle rested flat along its top, untouched since the last time it cooled. No sound came from it. No warmth, only the quiet weight of metal waiting on the table. The air in the room carried the smell of old cedar and faint smoke from evenings long past. Wooden beams crossed overhead, their grain darkened by time and weather, absorbing the last of the daylight that slipped through the screens. A thin draft moved under the sliding door, cool and light, brushing across the floorboards in a slow, wandering path. Outside, the rain thickened for a moment, then settled back into its calm, steady fall. Nothing is required from you. Near the far wall, a cushion lay neatly placed, its fabric slightly faded where someone often sat. Beside it, a small lantern waited with its wick trimmed, sitting in a shallow circle of shadow on the floor. The lantern was not yet lit, leaving the room to the gray light and the soft glow that leaked through the paper. On the screen, the blurred silhouettes of bamboo swayed, their shapes bending and straightening as the wind passed through the grove. Water gathered along the edge of the roof and dropped one bead at a time into a shallow stone basin outside. Each drop landed with a soft tap that folded into the wider sound of the rain. Somewhere, farther down the mountain, a bell sounded once, low and distant, its tone carried through the mist and then absorbed by the weather. Let tonight be simple. The clay cup remained motionless on the table, its chipped rim catching the faintest slice of shifting light. The kettle sat cold beside it, heavy and silent, its soot-darkened surface holding the memory of past fires rather than the heat of this night. The wooden table beneath them seemed to gather what little warmth the room still held, though no flame yet burned. And as the rain drew a gentle curtain across the world beyond the screens, the empty cup and quiet kettle waited together in the dim room, poised for a warmth that had not yet begun. A soft shift of air touched the sliding door before it moved, opening just enough for a figure to step inside. The monk entered quietly, his robe darkened at the hem where the rain had gathered during his walk along the stone path. Droplets clung to the fabric, falling one by one onto the wooden floor with light, muted taps. He paused just inside the doorway, letting the stillness of the room settle around him. He closed the door with a gentle motion, shutting out the wind, but not the sound of rain beyond the screens. The faint chill of the evening followed him inside, brushing lightly against the walls before fading into the dimness. His breath softened into the quiet, matching the rhythm of the falling rain. Nothing is required from you. The monk crossed the room toward the unlit lantern resting on the floor beside the cushion. His steps made hardly any sound, absorbed by the worn wood beneath his feet. Kneeling beside the lantern, he lifted it with both hands, turning it in the pale light that filtered through the screens. The flame inside had long since gone out, leaving only a trimmed wick ready for the next evening. He drew a small striker from his sleeve and touched it gently to the edge of the lantern. A faint spark leapt, then faded. A second spark caught the wick, and a thin flame curled into being, folding softly around itself before rising. Warm light spread outward from the lantern, moving slowly across the floor in expanding circles. The mind may rest now. Shadows retreated as the lantern brightened, revealing the lines of the wooden table and the objects resting on it. The clay cup glowed softly in the new warmth, its chipped rim casting a curved shadow across the hollow inside. The kettle beside it reflected a small band of amber light, the dark metal warming not in temperature, but in color. The lantern's flame steadied, breathing gently against the walls. The monk placed the lantern back on the floor, adjusting its angle so the light fell naturally across the room. He smoothed the cushion beside him with a slow, careful gesture, pressing the fabric until it lay flat and even. The soft rustle of cloth drifted into the quiet air, carried along with a hint of cedar from the lantern's small heat. Let tonight be simple. He approached the table and lowered himself onto the cushion, settling his robe into gentle folds around him. The warmth from the lantern reached him slowly, brushing his sleeves and casting subtle glimmers along the fabric. Outside, bamboo swayed, forming shifting silhouettes across the screen as the rain softened and thickened by turns. The monk rested his hands on his knees and breathed out quietly. Lantern light touched the cup again, catching a delicate highlight along its curved surface. The kettle remained still, reflecting only the soft pulse of flame. And as the monk sat in calm silence, the room brightened just enough to hold the moment, the warm lantern glow gathering around the waiting cup and the cold kettle on the wooden table. The monk rose from the cushion with a slow, steady motion, his robes falling into quiet folds around his ankles. Lantern light followed him as he stepped toward the far wall, brushing soft shapes across his sleeves. The air shifted gently in his wake, carrying the faint warmth of the lantern through the dim space. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the screens, softened by the bamboo swaying beyond. He reached the folded blanket placed neatly near the wall and lifted it with both hands. The fabric unfurled slightly, releasing a small breath of dust that shimmered in the lantern glow. He smoothed the blanket along its edges, pressing each corner down with calm, deliberate movements. Nothing is required from you. Beside the blanket lay another cushion, slightly indented from earlier evenings. The monk knelt and adjusted it with a slow, careful hand, flattening small creases until the surface rested evenly on the floor. His fingertips traced the edge of the cushion before he withdrew his hand, letting the room settle into the stillness that followed. The mind may rest now. A faint draft passed beneath the door, carrying with it the cool scent of wet earth. The lantern flame flickered once, stretching a shadow across the room before settling again. Dust motes drifted through its glow, rising and falling as though suspended in the warm amber air. The monk watched them briefly, then turned toward the wooden shelves. On the shelves rested small items arranged with quiet order. A folded cloth, a wooden box, a round stone used for grinding herbs. The monk adjusted their positions by the slightest amount, barely shifting their placement but refining the lines they created together. Shadows moved gently as he worked, guided by the lantern's pulse and the steady rhythm of rain. Let tonight be simple. He stepped back toward the center of the room, his bare feet pressing softly against the wood. The sound was light, almost lost beneath the murmur of rain outside. His robe brushed the floor, creating a small, steady rustle that faded as he came to stillness again. The lantern cast a warm halo across the floorboards, marking his place in the quiet space. Returning to the low table, the monk placed his hands lightly on its surface, feeling the grain of the wood beneath his palms. Warmth from the lantern gathered along the edge nearest the flame, leaving the far side of the table in a soft, gentle dimness. The clay cup rested in this border of light and shadow, its chipped rim catching the slightest gleam. The kettle remained cold beside it, untouched, waiting without sound. As the monk lowered himself once more onto the cushion, lantern light stretched across the table, illuminating the cup and kettle with a muted glow. Shadows swayed along the walls as bamboo outside moved in slow arcs. And in that quiet, the cup stayed where it was, holding its small hollow of darkness under the warm, trembling light of the lantern. The monk reached for the kettle with both hands, lifting it gently from the table. The iron felt cool beneath his palms, carrying the night's chill through its soot-darkened surface. He stood, slowly, letting the quiet settle again before turning toward the sliding door. Outside, The rain shifted into a softer rhythm, brushing the walkway with small, steady taps. He opened the door just enough to step through, allowing a thin draft of cool air to drift into the room. The lantern's glow stretched toward the hall, casting a narrow ribbon of amber across the wooden floor outside. His footsteps moved with almost no sound, absorbed by the smooth boards worn down by years of passing feet. Nothing is required from you. The corridor extended into gentle darkness, lit only by a few distant lanterns spaced widely along the walls. Their dim circles of light formed islands on the floor, leaving long stretches of shadow between them. The monk walked through these alternating bands of light and dark, the kettle balanced carefully in his hands. The air smelled of wet stone and summer rain. Farther along, he reached a stone basin set into the wall. Rainwater trickled into it from a carved channel above, each drop creating a soft, rounded echo that drifted into the quiet hall. Mist gathered faintly above the basin, rising in pale threads before fading into the cooler air. The mind may rest now. Kneeling beside it, the monk set the kettle down and dipped one hand briefly into the water. The chill touched his skin with a gentle clarity, grounding the moment before he lifted the kettle again. He tilted it slowly, allowing the fresh water to flow inside in a steady, hollow whisper. Droplets clung to the iron surface, catching what little light the corridor offered. When the kettle grew heavy, he lifted it with both hands, adjusting his grip to steady the weight. A bead of water slipped from the bottom and fell onto the stone floor, spreading into a small reflective mark. The corridor air pressed coolly around him, stirring the edges of his robe as he turned back toward the room. Let tonight be simple. He retraced his steps along the dim hallway, passing through the quiet pools of lantern glow. His footsteps remained soft, almost indistinguishable beneath the sound of rain outside. The kettle shifted slightly with each movement, water inside brushing the metal walls with quiet, rolling sounds. Shadows stretched and settled as he walked. Sliding the door open again, the monk stepped back into the warm lantern light of the room. The air welcomed him with a gentle stillness, embracing the coolness he carried from the hall. He placed the kettle near the brazier, droplets falling softly from its surface onto the wooden floor, and the clay cup on the table remained motionless, waiting under the lantern's steady glow as the night continued its quiet unfolding. The monk set the filled kettle beside the small brazier, its iron surface beating with droplets that slid quietly onto the floor. The brazier itself sat unlit, holding only a neat stack of kindling arranged from an earlier hour. Lantern glow reached toward it in soft waves, brushing the pale wood and the soot-darkened metal with warm light. Outside, the rain gathered strength, falling in long, steady lines. He knelt before the brazier, moving with the same unhurried calm that shaped the rest of the room. His fingers hovered briefly above the arranged wood, sensing the space between each piece. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, he adjusted the smallest twigs so they formed a gentle cradle beneath the thicker kindling. Nothing is required from you. The monk picked up a striker resting near the lantern and held it beside the brazier. A small spark jumped and vanished. He struck again, producing a brighter spark that touched the dried bark with a soft glow. On the third strike, a tiny ember took hold, pulsing faintly like a distant star fallen to the floor. He leaned in slightly, cupping his hands around the ember to shelter it from the cool draft. The ember breathed outward into a thin tongue of flame, catching the smallest twigs first. They curled inward as they burned, crackling in a whisper that merged with the rhythm of rain outside. The mind may rest now. The flame grew gently, spreading through the kindling in soft orange ripples. Light from the brazier joined the lantern glow, adding a deeper warmth to the room. The air thickened with the faint scent of warming cedar, rising in slow threads toward the ceiling beams. The kettle sat nearby, still cold, but touched now by the promise of heat. The monk adjusted one piece of wood with a steady hand, encouraging the fire to settle into a quiet, stable burn. Shadows shifted across the table as the flame strengthened, stretching long shapes across the floor and slowly retreating again. The brazier's warmth began to reach the lower part of the kettle, though no sound came from within yet. Let tonight be simple. He sat back on his heels, watching the flame steady itself into a calm, continuous glow. The iron kettle reflected the firelight in soft, curved strokes along its belly, warming in color, though not yet in temperature. The clay cup on the table caught the same glow, its chipped rim illuminated in a gentle, flickering line. You are safe here. A faint shimmer of heat rose above the brazier, bending the air just slightly in front of the monk. The fire crackled once, then softened into a low, regular murmur that filled the room with quiet warmth. And as the flame settled into its steady breath, the kettle rested beside it, still cool, waiting silently for the heat that was slowly gathering beneath its iron base. The monk opened the sliding door just enough to let a breath of cooler night air drift inside. The draft carried the scent of wet leaves and stone, slipping quietly across the floor and mingling with the warmth rising from the brazier. Rain traced long silver streaks beyond the threshold, falling from the roof in soft, uninterrupted lines. The flame behind him flickered once as the air touched it. He stepped into the doorway and paused, letting his gaze settle on the courtyard outside. Bamboo leaned gently under the weight of the rain, their narrow leaves quivering each time a drop slid from one stalk to another. The walkway stones glistened with thin pools of water that rippled whenever the wind stirred. Nothing is required from you. A soft rustle passed through the bamboo grove, brushing the leaves together in a quiet, lingering whisper. Water gathered at their tips and fell in rounded beads to the ground, creating small ripples across the puddles beneath them. The faint mist rising from the stones moved in pale, drifting threads through the cool air. The monk watched these motions without shifting his stance. From somewhere deeper in the temple grounds, a bell sounded, a low, gentle tone that traveled through the rain in slow waves. It echoed softly through the courtyard, carried by the damp air until it faded into the night. The bell's resonance seemed to settle into the wooden beams above, quiet and unhurried. The mind may rest now. Wind moved along the walkway, brushing the edges of the doorframe and carrying droplets inward. The lantern inside responded with a small dance of light, its glow shifting across the wooden floor in trembling shapes. The fire in the brazier brightened for a moment before returning to its steady burn. Outside, bamboo swayed in slow arcs. The monk slid the door open a little wider, letting more of the cool night's breath move into the room. Shadows of leaves and stalks stretched across the screens, shifting softly with every motion of the grove. The scent of fresh rain and deep earth blended with the cedar warmth behind him, creating a calm drift of air through the room. Let tonight be simple. He stood there for a few breaths longer, the cool air brushing his sleeves, the lantern glow warming his back. The sound of rain softened, becoming a mist-like patter against the stones. A thin thread of wind curled around the edge of the doorway, lifting the faintest edge of his robe. You are safe here. When he finally slid the door closed again, the room welcomed him with its warm lantern light and the gentle murmur of the brazier. A thin shimmer of heat rose from beneath the kettle now, bending the air just slightly in its glow, and on the table, the clay cup remained untouched, its hollow still cool and waiting as the night deepened softly around it. The monk returned to the cushion beside the low table, lowering himself with a slow, steady motion. His robe folded softly around him as he settled, the fabric brushing the wooden floor in a quiet sweep. The lantern's glow reached across the room in warm, gentle waves, softening the shadows left by the cooling evening. Outside, the rain eased into a muted, steady whisper. He rested his hands on his thighs, fingers relaxed, posture still. The fire in the brazier crackled lightly as a small piece of kindling shifted deeper into the flame. Heat rose in delicate threads beneath the kettle, bending the air in soft, trembling motions. Nothing is required from you. The monk leaned slightly toward the table, his gaze settling on the clay cup. Lantern light touched its surface, warming the natural variations in the clay and brightening the edge of the small chip along the rim. Inside the cup, the hollow remained cool and shadowed, interrupted only by a faint glimmer of reflected flame. The mind may rest now. He reached toward the cup with both hands, turning it gently to examine its shape. The clay felt cool against his fingertips, carrying the temperature of the dim room rather than the glow of the lantern. He rotated the cup once, then once more, aligning the chipped rim toward the window where the bamboo shadows played softly along the screen. He set it back onto the table with a quiet, steady touch. Shadows stretched slowly as the lantern flame breathed, gliding across the wooden table, then drifting over the monk's sleeves. The brazier added its own soft light, deepening the amber tone that filled the room. Outside, the bamboo grove shifted again, their silhouettes wavering across the screens in slow strokes. Let tonight be simple. The kettle made its first quiet sound, a soft creak as the iron warmed under the flame. A thin ripple of heat rose from its surface, moving upward in faint, shimmering lines. The monk noted the sound, but did not reach for the kettle, allowing the warmth to build in its own time. The fire beneath it glowed deeper, illuminating the underside of the vessel. He breathed out gently, a steady, even exhale that barely stirred the air. The lantern reflected off the kettle's curved belly in soft arcs, casting light toward the cup that waited nearby. Steam had not yet begun to rise, but the presence of heat was growing, shaping the air into quiet, shifting patterns. You are safe here. The cup remained where he had placed it, its hollow turned toward the unfolding warmth of the brazier and lantern. Light drifted along its rim, trembled once, then steadied. And as the monk rested on the cushion, the cup sat in gentle anticipation, poised between shadow and glow, while the kettle's warmth grew quietly beside it. The brazier's flame steadied into a deeper orange, its glow spreading across the floor in soft, widening waves. The wood inside crackled gently, each shift sending a faint spark of light upward before it vanished into the warm air. Heat gathered beneath the kettle in slow, patient layers, touching the iron with a warmth that grew by degrees. Outside, the rain softened into a thin mist that brushed the screens with a gentle hum. The monk adjusted his posture on the cushion, placing both hands on the table near the cup. His palms hovered just above the surface, sensing the faint warmth drifting from the brazier. Shadows from the flame reached across his sleeves, painting slow-moving patterns along the folds of his robe. Nothing is required from you. The kettle released a second, more distinct creak as the iron expanded under the rising heat. A faint shimmer formed beneath it, where warm air met the cooler currents lingering on the floor. The monk watched without moving, letting the moment unfold in its own quiet rhythm. The mind may rest now. He leaned forward slightly, bringing the cup closer to him with a gentle pull of both hands. The clay felt cool, in contrast to the warming air near the brazier. Lantern light reflected along its surface, giving the cup a soft glow that shifted with every subtle movement of the flame. He placed it beside the kettle, aligned carefully toward the warmth. From beneath the kettle, a thin line of vapor escaped, a barely visible wisp that dissolved almost as soon as it appeared. It drifted upward in a narrow ribbon before fading into the shadows near the ceiling beams. The iron surface now held a muted glow of its own, warmed by the flame, yet quiet in its stillness. Let tonight be simple. The monk adjusted a piece of wood inside the brazier, nudging it into a slightly more balanced position. The flame responded with a small rise, brightening for a breath before settling into its steady burn. Heat spread outward in gentle waves, reaching the base of the kettle more evenly. The cup beside it remained cool but ready, its surface beginning to gather a faint trace of warmth from the air. A soft sound came from the kettle again, different this time, less a creak and more a subtle shifting of water within. The monk listened without lifting his gaze, letting the sound blend with the rain's quiet pattern outside. You are safe here. The flame beneath the kettle flickered once, then steadied into a quiet, confident glow. Light shimmered along the iron surface, warming the air around it in slow, rising threads. And as the monk sat quietly before the table, the kettle began its gradual journey toward heat, holding the first hints of warmth that would soon rise into the night. A soft, shifting sound rose from within the kettle, subtle but distinct, like water turning over in its sleep. The iron walls held the warmth now, their dark surface touched by a faint, deepening glow from the brazier. Heat gathered along the bottom, rising slowly through the vessel in thin, steady waves. Outside, rain softened to a whisper that blended with the quiet of the room. The monk leaned slightly closer, Resting one hand on the table, palm open toward the warmth. His fingers relaxed as the air reached him, shaped by the gentle rhythm of the fire. Lantern light moved with the flame, casting soft, wavering arcs across his sleeve. Nothing is required from you. Inside the kettle, the water shifted again, producing a hollow, rounded sound that resonated through the metal. The monk did not touch the kettle yet. He simply watched the shimmering air rising above it. The shimmer bent the lantern glow into uneven lines that danced across the wooden table. The mind may rest now. He reached for a thin wooden stick resting beside the brazier and used it to adjust one of the small twigs beneath the flame. The fire brightened subtly, its warmth filling the room with a deeper hue. Smokeless, steady heat pressed upward into the kettle, encouraging the water inside to move with a little more presence. A faint sound of bubbling drifted through the quiet. The monk placed the stick aside and folded his hands loosely in his lap, eyes softened toward the kettle. The first threads of vapor rose in delicate curls, barely visible until they passed near the lantern's glow. Each slender wisp dissolved as quickly as it formed, leaving only the suggestion of warmth in the air above the metal. Let tonight be simple. The clay cup sat beside the kettle, catching the warmth from both lantern and brazier. Its surface appeared smoother under the shifting light, the small chip along the rim softened by the glow. The cup's hollow remained dark, but carried the faintest touch of warmth near its edge, where the air brushed it gently. The kettle continued its soft murmuring. The room held its stillness as the water began to stir more earnestly. Sound rose from within the kettle in small, rounded pulses, spaced irregularly but growing in quiet confidence. Heat radiated from the brazier in a low, rhythmic breath that matched the flame's movement. You are safe here. One thin strand of vapor rose higher than the rest, crossing the lantern light in a soft, glowing arc before it vanished into the dimness above. The kettle settled into a warm, steady whisper, its presence deepening in the center of the room. And, as the flame burned in patient steadiness, the water inside continued to wake, gathering warmth for the moment still to come. A rounded pulse of sound came from the kettle, gentle and low, as the water inside shifted against the warming iron. The brazier's flame glowed deeper beneath it, sending slow waves of heat upward through the vessel. Lantern light trembled in response to the rising warmth, its glow bending over the kettle's curved belly. Outside, the rain softened into a mist-like hush that clung to the night. The monk rested his hands on the table, palms open, feeling the faint shimmer of warm air rising toward him. His breath moved in long, even lines, slipping quietly into the stillness around him. Shadows from the lantern brushed his sleeves, lengthening and contracting with the flame's gentle movement. Nothing is required from you. Inside the kettle, the water spoke again, this time a soft, rounded tap as a bubble formed and drifted upward. The metal responded with a faint vibration, almost inaudible beneath the rain. A delicate wisp of vapor rose from the spout, thin and pale, dissolving just as it caught the lantern's glow. The mind may rest now. Heat gathered beneath the kettle, forming a shimmer that wavered just above the brazier's rim. The monk adjusted the flame with a careful shift of a wooden twig, guiding the fire into a steadier burn. The warmth that followed rose through the room in calm, unhurried layers. The kettle continued to breathe its quiet, warming sounds. The cup beside it absorbed the growing heat, its clay surface touched by a faint glow from the brazier. A thin trace of warmth spread along the rim, softening the coolness that had settled inside earlier. Lantern light reflected within its hollow, forming a small crescent of gold that trembled with each faint movement of steam. Let tonight be simple. More vapor lifted from the spout, slightly fuller now, curling upward before drifting sideways in the lantern glow. The air around the kettle shimmered gently, bending the edges of light where warmth pressed against cooler pockets of air. The monk watched the subtle motion without leaning in, allowing the moment to unfold naturally. You are safe here. The brazier crackled once as a small ember settled deeper into the bed of ash. Heat rose in steadier ribbons now, carrying the scent of warmed cedar through the quiet room. The kettle responded with a soft, steady murmur as the water within shifted again, preparing to rise into true steam. And as the monk sat in calm stillness, a new, thicker thread of vapor curled from the spout, wavering through the lantern's amber glow before dissolving into the dimness above. A soft, rounded hum rose from the kettle as the water inside grew warmer, the sound gentle and rhythmic, like a breath expanding in slow motion. Heat spread through the iron walls, deepening their faint glow under the brazier's steady flame. Thin wisps of vapor lifted from the spout in pale curls, wavering upward before dissolving into the room's quiet air. Outside, the rain held to a fine mist, brushing the screens with a muted whisper. The monk shifted only slightly on his cushion, adjusting the fold of his robe beneath his knees. His hands rested loosely on the table, open and steady, gathering the warmth drifting upward from the brazier. Lantern light reflected softly across his knuckles, bending each time the flame moved. Nothing is required from you. Inside the kettle, another bubble rose, slow, rounded, unhurried. It touched the iron with a quiet tap before breaking, sending a faint shiver through the water. More vapor followed, rising in threads a little fuller than before, pale against the lantern's warm glow. The mind may rest now. The monk lifted his gaze toward the spout, watching the subtle pattern of steam forming and vanishing. Each curl drifted upward in its own gentle path, some straight, some bending sideways before disappearing into the dimness. The shimmer of warm air distorted the lantern's reflection on the kettle's surface, creating soft, wavering shapes. The brazier breathed a small crackle into the room. He leaned closer to the table, not to touch the kettle, but to feel how the air shifted around it. The warmth brushed against his face in light, delicate waves. The clay cup beside the kettle held a faint glow along its rim, catching a thin reflection of the steam rising nearby. Let tonight be simple. More steam gathered, curling from the spout in a continuous, soft thread. It rose through the lantern light, glowing faintly gold before dissolving above the monk's hands. Shadows moved along the table in response, sliding gently across the wood in slow motions shaped by the heat. The cup's hollow deepened in color as the light shifted around it. The kettle murmured again, a low, rounded tone that blended with the whisper of rain outside. Heat had fully taken hold beneath it, rising in steady pulses that bounced softly against the iron. The lantern and brazier glowed together, filling the room with warm, layered light. You are safe here. A single, fuller curl of steam rose higher than the others, bending in a delicate arc before drifting into the dim space near the ceiling. It held shape for a moment longer than the rest, glowing faintly in the lantern's amber light. And as it dissolved into the quiet, another thin thread formed at the spout, trembling gently in the warm air that continued to rise. A deeper whisper came from within the kettle as the water shifted into a more insistent warmth. Small bubbles formed near the bottom, brushing the iron with soft, rounded taps that pulsed through the vessel. The brazier's flame glowed brighter for a breath, casting a richer amber across the floor before settling again. Outside, the mist drifted in slow veils across the courtyard. The monk adjusted his posture, folding his hands together for a moment before placing them gently on the table. Warm air rose in steady currents, brushing across his fingertips and softening the coolness left from the rain. Lantern light flickered along the contours of his robe, shaping gentle waves of brightness and shadow. Nothing is required from you. Steam lifted from the kettle in continuous, wavering strands now, each one drifting higher before bending in the shifting air. The glow from the lantern caught along the edges of the vapor, turning some curls pale gold before they disappeared into the dim space above. The scent of warm iron and cedar mingled subtly in the room. The mind may rest now. He leaned forward slightly, watching the way the steam traveled upward, folding into itself before opening again into thin, trembling shapes. The air shimmered above the kettle, bending the lantern's reflection into soft, fluid lines. Every few breaths, a bubble rose with a quiet knock, hinting at the warmth gathering beneath the metal. The monk remained still. The clay cup sat a little closer to the heat than before, its surface absorbing warmth from both the flame and the air. A faint glow formed along its rim, soft but clear under the lantern's light. When steam drifted near it, the clay seemed to hold the warmth for a moment before releasing it back into the room. Let tonight be simple. More vapor rose, curling into thicker threads that danced lightly above the spout. They shifted with subtle variations in the air, some forming loops before fading, others stretching upward in long, delicate ribbons. The brazier crackled softly as another piece of kindling caught the flame, deepening the warmth that filled the space. The monk's breath matched the slow rhythm of the heat. A single bubble burst inside the kettle, with a slightly sharper sound, though still gentle, blending into the room's layered quiet. The steam responded by thickening for a moment, rising in a pale, drifting wave that moved toward the ceiling before vanishing. You are safe here. The lantern reflected across the kettle's curved surface, stretching into a trembling line that wavered beneath the shimmer of warm air. Steam gathered again at the spout, forming shapes that rose and dissolved in a calm, continuous motion. And as the monk watched, a new thread of vapor curled upward, brighter in the lantern glow, drifting softly toward the dim rafters of the room. A fuller sound rose from the kettle, low and rounded, as the water inside reached a deeper warmth. Small bubbles gathered along the base before lifting upward, tapping softly against the iron in uneven intervals. The brazier's flame answered with a quiet flicker, its glow pulsing in gentle breaths across the floor. Outside, the mist settled along the walkway stones in thin, drifting layers. The monk placed both hands near the kettle, palms facing down on the table, feeling the rising warmth through the wood. His breath moved steadily, shaping the air with slow, even exhalations. Lantern light brushed the back of his hands, highlighting their stillness as the room deepened in gentle glow. Nothing is required from you. Steam rose more confidently now, forming a soft, continuous flow from the spout. Each strand wavered as it climbed, bending into delicate arcs that drifted toward the ceiling beams. The air above the kettle shimmered, bending the lantern's reflection into trembling waves. The mind may rest now. He leaned a little closer, watching the steam twist and soften in the warm air. The surface of the kettle glowed faintly under the shifting light, revealing subtle textures in the iron that had accumulated through years of use. Steam brushed the edges of the cup nearby, warming its rim with a barely visible haze. The room held its calm. The monk adjusted the position of the kettle by a small amount, sliding it slightly closer to the heart of the flame. The brazier responded with a deeper glow, its heat rising in stronger, but still gentle currents. A subtle scent of warmed metal drifted into the air, mixing with the cedar's soft fragrance. Let tonight be simple. Another bubbling sound echoed from within the kettle, more frequent now, though never sharp. Each bubble rose with quiet purpose, joining the soft chorus of warmth inside. The clay cup beside it absorbed the heat more fully, its surface dimming and brightening as the lantern's flame wavered. The monk watched without hurry. He rested his hands again on his knees, letting the warmth reach him naturally. The shadows from the lantern shifted across his robe in long, slow arcs, blending with the glow from the brazier. Steam continued its upward dance, folding gently into the dimness near the ceiling. You are safe here. A fuller, richer curl of steam rose, carrying with it a hint of the heat building inside the kettle. It bent toward the lantern's glow before lifting higher, trembling faintly as it thinned into the quiet air. And as the room gathered more warmth, the kettle's soft voice deepened, preparing for the full rise of steam still to come. The kettle released a deeper, steadier hum as the water inside reached a quiet, rolling warmth. Heat rose in smooth waves from the brazier, touching the iron in soft pulses that glowed beneath the shifting lantern light. Steam climbed in fuller threads now, curling upward with an easy confidence that filled the room with gentle movement. Outside, the mist settled closer to the ground, drifting low along the stones. The monk placed both hands near the kettle again, palms facing the warm shimmer rising from its surface. The air brushed his skin in delicate, drifting lines, carrying with it the scent of heated metal and cedar. His shoulders softened as he breathed out, matching the calm tempo of the flame. Nothing is required from you. Inside the kettle, the water rolled in quiet circles, each turn producing a subtle shift in sound. A bubble rose and broke near the spout, sending a small tremor through the thin line of steam above it. The lantern's glow widened across the iron surface, reflecting a soft, liquid shimmer shaped by the rising heat. The mind may rest now. The monk leaned forward and rearranged a single piece of wood inside the brazier, guiding it gently toward the center of the flame. The fire flared for a breath, then settled into a richer, steadier burn. Shadows along the floor responded with slow, stretching motions before returning to their quiet places. Warmth spread more evenly across the table. The clay cup, sitting closer to the kettle now, absorbed the deepening warmth in its surface. Its curved rim held a faint glow, trembling softly each time a wisp of steam drifted nearby. The air inside the cup changed subtly, shifting from cool stillness to a gentler, tempered warmth. Let tonight be simple. More steam rose, layering the air between kettle and ceiling in thin, wavering veils. Some strands glowed briefly as they passed through the lantern light before dissolving into the dimness above. The brazier added its quiet crackle to the room, the sound small but steady, grounding the warmth with its gentle rhythm. The monk listened, without moving. He let his hands rest in his lap again, watching the air above the kettle tremble with the growing heat. The reflection of the lantern shimmered in the wavering space, bending and straightening in slow, dreamlike motions. "You are safe here." A soft shift sounded within the kettle as the water rolled in a fuller circle, sending up a thicker plume of steam that curled into the warm air above. It rose in a smooth arc before thinning into pale threads that drifted toward the lantern glow. And as the monk watched, the steam gathered into a faint, luminous cloud, holding shape for one quiet moment before easing into the dimness around it. A deeper pulse moved through the kettle, a rounded sound that hinted at the water nearing its quiet boil. The brazier's flame lifted in a slow, steady arc, its glow warming the lower walls of the kettle with a soft, amber sheen. Steam rose in thicker threads now, drifting in gentle curves before dissolving into the dim space above. Outside, the mist thinned into a delicate haze that clung softly to the night air. The monk placed one hand near the kettle, hovering above the warm shimmer rising from its surface. Heat brushed his palm in calm, steady waves, each one carrying the faint scent of warming metal through the room. Lantern light trembled slightly on his sleeve, shaped by the movement of steam between him and the flame. "Nothing is required from you." The water inside shifted again, forming a small cluster of bubbles that rose and broke against the iron with tender, muted sounds. More followed, unhurried, round, whisper-soft, echoing through the kettle in gentle rhythms. Steam lifted in fuller plumes, bending as they met the lantern's glow. The mind may rest now. The monk reached for the kettle's handle, testing its warmth with a careful touch before releasing it again. He did not lift it yet. The water needed more time to settle into its full heat. He watched the tremble of air above the spout, the visible shimmer where warm currents climbed into cooler pockets of the room. Shadows shifted across the table in slow, sweeping arcs. The clay cup absorbed more warmth from its place beside the kettle. Light from the lantern brushed its surface, softening the lines of the small chip along the rim. A faint haze formed inside the cup as the air warmed, blurring the hollow in a thin, wavering veil. Let tonight be simple. From the kettle, a rounded bubble rose with a slightly sharper sound, though still gentle, echoing softly beneath the lantern's glow. The brazier answered with a muted crackle, sending up a brief flicker of flame before settling again. Steam drifted sideways as a faint draft moved beneath the sliding door, lifting the threads into quiet motion. The room held its warmth with patient composure. The monk exhaled slowly, his breath traveling across the table and merging with the warm air rising from the kettle. Light shimmered along the edge of the spout, brightening as steam gathered in a small, luminous arc. "You are safe here." A fuller plume of steam rose, soft and rounded, lifting higher than the others before bending toward the ceiling beams. It drifted in a slow, elegant curve, its glow shimmering faintly in the lantern light. And as it dissolved into the dimness above, the kettle released another gentle pulse of sound, signaling its slow, patient arrival at warmth. The kettle shifted with a fuller, warmer resonance, the water inside rolling in calm circles that tapped softly against the iron walls. Heat from the brazier deepened, sending a wider shimmer through the air above the flame. Steam rose in smooth, continuous ribbons, drifting upward like thin veils dissolving into the lantern's glow. Outside, the mist lightened into a faint, silvery breath along the walkway. The monk adjusted his posture, leaning slightly closer to the table, his hands resting gently on the wood. Warmth from the kettle met the back of his knuckles in soft, rising waves. Lantern light pooled across the surface of the table, forming gentle gradients of gold that shifted each time the flame moved. Nothing is required from you. Inside the kettle, a series of small bubbles surfaced in steady rhythm, their quiet knocks merging into a soft hum beneath the lidless spout. The air above the vessel trembled, bending the lantern's glow into thin, wavering shapes. Steam thickened into fuller plumes, rising and drifting sideways as a faint draft moved through the room. The mind may rest now. The monk reached again for the kettle's handle, wrapping his fingers around the iron with a slow, testing touch. The heat met his skin in steady pulses, warm, but not yet too warm to hold. He lifted the kettle slightly, just enough for the water inside to shift, creating a low, rounded wave that moved through the metal. Then he set it back down with care. The clay cup waited beside the flame's warmth, its inner surface now holding a faint glow from the lantern. The small chip along the rim cast a soft, curved shadow across the table, blending seamlessly with the wavering light. A delicate warmth gathered inside the cup, shaping the air into thin, rising threads barely visible in the dimness. Let tonight be simple. More steam rose from the spout, drifting into the lantern's light in long curls that dissolved high above. The brazier crackled once, releasing a small spark that glowed briefly before disappearing into the ash. Heat continued its gentle ascent, filling the room with a soft, steady glow that shaped every surface with warmth. The monk watched the steam with a quiet, steady gaze. He lifted the kettle again, this time raising it a little higher, sensing the weight of the warming water within. The motion caused a soft shimmer across the surface of the steam, bending the rising threads into smooth arcs. You are safe here. Holding the kettle just above the table, the monk shifted it by a small degree, positioning the spout toward the waiting cup. Steam curled around the iron as he held it steady, the glow from the lantern brushing both kettle and cup with a quiet, intimate warmth. And in the stillness that followed, the water inside settled into a gentle roll, preparing for the first drop to form. The monk held the kettle steady, letting the warmth settle fully into the iron before tilting it any further. Steam wrapped around his fingers in soft, wavering threads, rising past his knuckles before dissolving into the dim lantern light. The water inside shifted with a rounded whisper, brushing the walls of the kettle in slow, deliberate motion. Outside, the mist clung to the bamboo leaves in delicate beads. He angled the kettle a fraction, just enough for the water to lean toward the spout. A shimmer appeared along the lip, a thin line of light bending over the metal's edge. The monk did not rush the motion. His hands remained steady, allowing gravity and warmth to find their quiet balance. Nothing is required from you. A small bead gathered at the tip of the spout, trembling as steam curled past it. The bead grew slowly, catching the lantern glow in a soft, golden droplet. It clung to the metal with a quiet persistence, stretching downward in a delicate arc. The mind may rest now. The monk breathed gently, the motion barely stirring the warm air rising from the brazier. Shadows from the flames swayed across the table, drifting over the cup's rim in soft, uneven lines. The droplet at the spout trembled again, lengthening into a smooth oval as heat shaped its slow descent. The room held its silence. The clay cup waited below, its hollow warmed just enough to welcome the first fall of water. A faint haze lingered inside it, shaped by the warmth drifting from the kettle. Lantern glow shimmered along the inner curve of the cup, outlining its stillness in a thin arc of gold. Let tonight be simple. The bead lengthened further, pulling away from the spout with a quiet determination. Steam curled around it, bending its shape into gentle distortions as it formed a perfect drop. The kettle shifted slightly in the monk's hands, though his grip remained calm and unmoving. Heat pressed softly upward in slow pulses. A soft creak came from the iron, the sound of warmth expanding through metal worn by years of evenings like this one. The drop, full now, trembled with the slightest movement of air, passing between lantern and brazier. You are safe here. Then, at last, the bead released. It fell in a slow, quiet arc toward the waiting cup below, glowing briefly in the lantern light as it descended. And as it neared the hollow of the clay, the steam parted gently around it, leaving the drop suspended for a single, lingering moment above the darkened cup. The drop fell with unhurried grace, drifting through the warm air between kettle and cup. Lantern light glimmered along its surface, shaping it into a tiny sphere of gold before it entered the shadow beneath the spout. For a moment, it seemed to slow, suspended in the soft swirl of steam rising around it. Outside, the mist settled further, quieting the world beyond the screens. It touched the bottom of the cup with a near-silent sound, a faint and rounded tap that barely disturbed the air. A small shimmer spread outward from the point of contact, brightening the curved interior with a brief pulse of reflected light. The hollow of the cup accepted the warmth without ripple or echo. Nothing is required from you. The monk held the kettle steady, allowing the last of the steam to curl past his hands. The warmth spread upward from the iron in slow, steady waves, carrying the faint scent of heated metal into the quiet room. Shadows moved across his sleeves as the brazier flame shifted behind him, deepening the amber glow that filled the space. The mind may rest now. Another bead began to form at the spout, small and uncertain at first. It gathered slowly, shaped by gravity and warmth, trembling as steam passed beneath it. The lantern's glow touched its forming surface, turning it into a faint glimmer suspended in the dimness. Inside the cup, the first drop rested alone, a single, darkened mark on the clay. The monk adjusted the kettle by a slight angle, inviting the next drop to grow more confidently. The motion sent a ripple through the water inside, a soft, rounded sound that blended with the quiet crackle of the brazier. Heat pressed upward with gentle insistence, shaping the room into a warm envelope of rising air. Let tonight be simple. The bead swelled, holding its form for several breaths before stretching downward into a teardrop shape. Steam curled around it in thin ribbons, bending the outlines of the droplet as it prepared to fall. The monk's hands remained steady, allowing the moment to unfold at its own pace. The cup waited in warm, still silence. A faint tremor ran through the droplet as the spout warmed further. Light from the lantern wavered across its surface, deepening its gold before dimming again. You are safe here. Then the second bead slipped free. It fell toward the cup through a soft veil of steam, joining the first drop with a gentle, muted touch. And as the two drops settled together at the bottom of the cup, a third bead formed slowly at the spout, shimmering in the warm air, not yet ready to fall. The third bead at the spout trembled as it formed, round and clear beneath the lantern's softened glow. Warm air rose around it in gentle currents, bending its outline into a wavering shine. Steam curled upward in thin, drifting strands, weaving between kettle and ceiling in quiet, unbroken motions. Outside, the mist dimmed into a barely audible hush. The monk shifted his grip slightly, steadying the kettle without urging it forward. Heat pressed into his palms in soft pulses, warming the space between his fingers and the wrapped handle. Shadows wavered across his robe as the fire behind him moved with the slow rhythm of the flame. Nothing is required from you. The bead stretched downward, forming a delicate teardrop that clung to the iron for a moment longer than the last. Lantern light gathered along its surface, turning its edge into a faint, glowing crescent. A thin thread of steam drifted past it, shaping a trembling halo around the droplet. The mind may rest now. Inside the cup, the first two drops rested in a darkened glimmer at the base. Their warmth shifted subtly through the clay, leaving the slightest touch of heat along the rim. Lantern glow deepened within the hollow, catching the faint shimmer of moisture beginning to gather. The air around the cup warmed in a slow, steady rise. The droplet at the spout released itself, falling toward the cup in a small, quiet descent. It met the earlier drops with a muted sound, spreading a brief ripple across the shallow pool forming at the bottom. The ripple faded quickly, leaving the surface smooth and dark once more. Let tonight be simple. Steam thickened near the spout, lifting into the room in soft ribbons that curved gracefully in the lantern glow. Warmth from the brazier expanded outward, shaping the air into gentle patterns that brushed against the monk's face. The kettle hummed with a deeper resonance as the water continued to heat. The monk watched with steady calm. Another bead began to form, smaller at first, swelling as the kettle shifted slightly in his grasp. Heat shimmered through the rising steam, turning the droplet into a trembling point of gold. You are safe here. The monk tilted the kettle a fraction more, guiding the forming bead toward the moment of release. Steam parted around the spout, rising in a soft, luminous veil, and in the warm stillness of the room, the next droplet clung to the iron edge, poised in the quiet between holding and falling. A fuller warmth settled through the kettle as the water inside reached its gentle boil. The monk shifted the handle slightly, angling the spout toward the cup without haste. Steam drifted in steady waves, thick enough now to bend the lantern light into soft, flickering arcs. Outside, the mist had nearly vanished, leaving the night wrapped in a deep, muted quiet. He tilted the kettle a little more, allowing the forming bead to lengthen into a smooth, trembling thread. The droplet stretched downward, gathering weight until it finally slipped free. It fell in a soft arc and touched the shallow pool in the cup, sending out a ripple that glimmered briefly before fading into stillness. Nothing is required from you. A second bead formed almost immediately, larger than the last. It stretched downward, wavered once in the warm air, and released in another quiet drop. The monk held the kettle steady, letting the rhythm of falling water find its natural pace. The mind may rest now. As warmth rose around him, the lantern glow took on a richer tone, deepening the shadows cast across the table. The cup's clay walls shimmered faintly under the shifting light, their color warming as steam curled past. The surface of the water inside trembled with each new drop, darkening into deeper shades of amber. The room held its gentle hush. The monk tilted the kettle a fraction more. This time, the bead did not fall cleanly. It stretched into a long, delicate thread that remained unbroken. The thin stream descended into the cup, scattering small ripples across the growing pool. Steam wrapped the stream in soft, wavering lines, drifting upward in pale curves. Let tonight be simple. The steady pour continued, quiet and unhurried. The cup warmed beneath the falling water, absorbing the heat through its clay walls. Lantern reflections swirled across the surface, shifting as the stream moved through them. The kettle hummed softly, its sound merging with the slow crackle of the brazier. Steam rose fuller now, shaping the air between monk and cup into a glowing veil. His hands remained steady, the warmth brushing gently across his fingers as he held the kettle at its delicate angle. You are safe here. Gradually, the monk eased the kettle back, narrowing the stream until it thinned into one last trembling line. The line broke into droplets, falling one by one until the final bead released with a quiet tap. And as the stream ended, a faint shimmer of warmth rose from the cup, drifting upward in thin spirals through the lantern's amber glow. The monk set the kettle down beside the brazier, letting its weight settle quietly onto the wooden table. A final curl of steam lifted from the spout before fading into the warm air above it. The brazier glowed with a steady ember light, casting slow, pulsing shadows along the floorboards. Outside, the night deepened into a velvety stillness, touched only by the faint drip of water from the eaves. He drew the cup closer with both hands, curling his fingers gently around the warmed clay. Heat met his skin in a soft, steady bloom, spreading through his palms with unhurried ease. Lantern glow trembled across the cup's curved surface, illuminating the thin veil of steam rising from within. Nothing is required from you. The water inside had settled into a quiet pool, its surface smoothing after the final ripples of the pour. A faint reflection of the lantern shimmered at its center, bending with each subtle shift of steam. The small chip on the rim cast a curved shadow across the warm liquid, deepening the amber hue in the hollow below. The mind may rest now. He lifted the cup slightly, just enough to feel the weight of the warm water gathered inside. The clay radiated a gentle heat into his fingers, neither sharp nor intense, only calm, steady warmth. Steam rose in thin spirals, drifting past his knuckles and dissolving a few breaths later. The flame in the brazier responded with a small, steady flicker. Bringing the cup closer, the monk let his breath brush lightly across the surface of the tea. The rising steam curled around the warm air of his exhale, forming soft, overlapping shapes. The lantern's glow deepened in the mist, turning it into faint strokes of gold and pale white. Let tonight be simple. He held the cup still, its warmth gathering along the inside of his wrists. Shadows shifted across his robe as the brazier's flames settled into a calmer burn. Outside, bamboo swayed with a gentle rustle, their silhouette moving across the screen in slow, measured arcs. The room filled with the quiet weight of heat and stillness. The cup remained close to his face, though he did not sip from it yet. Instead, he allowed the warmth to settle between his palms and rise through the steam touching his cheeks. The glow inside the cup shimmered with every soft movement of air. "You are safe here." The monk lowered the cup a fraction, holding it just above the table. Steam drifted upward in a calm, continuous thread, stretching toward the lantern light before thinning into the dimness above. And in the quiet between breaths, the tea's surface glowed in a warm, trembling arc, carrying its heat gently into the quiet room. Steam drifted upward from the cup in slow, wandering strands, twisting gently before thinning into the dimness. Each curl shifted shape as it met the warmer air rising from the brazier, bending the lantern glow into trembling ribbons of amber. The monk held the cup just above the table, its warmth settling steadily into his palms. Outside, the last traces of mist clung to the stones in quiet, silvered patches. He breathed softly, watching the way the steam drifted past his face. The warmth touched his skin in faint, wavering pulses, carrying a subtle scent of heated clay. Lantern light moved across the cup's rim, glimmering along the small chip as it trembled with each shift of the flame. Nothing is required from you. The surface of the tea darkened into a calm, reflective pool, broken only when a strand of steam collapsed back toward the liquid and vanished. The lantern's image shimmered at the center, bending and stretching as the warmth continued its slow rise. The monk tilted the cup slightly, letting the steam brush the side of his robe. The mind may rest now. He lowered the cup toward the table, just enough for its base to nearly touch the wood, but not settle fully upon it. Warmth radiated downward, shaping the air into a soft shimmer around his hands. The brazier's flame pulsed gently behind him, sending faint shadows gliding along the floorboards. The cup hovered in the quiet space between heat and stillness. A light draft slipped beneath the sliding door, weaving through the room in a cool, delicate line. The passing air nudged the steam into drifting curves that stretched sideways before spiraling upward once more. Lantern glow flickered across the shifting steam, turning parts of it into pale gold. Let tonight be simple. He straightened slightly, adjusting the cup's angle so that the rim caught more of the lantern's warmth. A thin arc of reflected light appeared within the tea, trembling whenever the steam thickened. Shadows from the bamboo outside slid softly across the screens, their movements slow and unrushed. The room held its steady quiet. Steam grew thinner as the tea began to cool, forming wisps that rose only a short distance before fading. The monk watched the subtle change, noticing how the warm haze shifted from bold curves to faint, dissolving lines. "You are safe here." He held the cup a moment longer, feeling the warmth settle into a softer pulse beneath his fingers. A single ribbon of steam drifted upward, curling once as it passed into the lantern's glow. And as it thinned into a pale thread, the cup hovered just above the table, cradling the warmth that still lingered within its quiet hollow. The monk brought the cup slowly toward the table, his hands steady as the warmth diffused through his palms. The base of the cup hovered just above the wood for a quiet moment, holding the last of its rising heat. Steam drifted upward in thin, wavering curls, softening into faint threads before dissolving into the dim air. Outside, bamboo leaves brushed together with a gentle, rhythmic whisper. He lowered the cup the final distance, letting it meet the table with a soft, muted touch. A faint ring of warmth spread outward along the wood, vanishing almost as soon as it appeared. The clay radiated a subtle heat into the air around it, lighter now, delicate. Nothing is required from you. The tea's surface settled into a calm pool, its amber depth darkened by the cooling room. A narrow reflection of the lantern shimmered across it, bending each time a thin wisp of steam drifted upward. Shadows from the brazer's flame moved across the cup, curving gently along the rim. The mind may rest now. The monk rested his hands beside the cup, fingers relaxed, palms open to the warmth lingering in the space between table and flame. The cool night air brushed the floor in a slow, wandering line, touching the edges of his robe with a faint chill. Lantern glow softened the fold of fabric at his wrist. The cup remained still. A soft crackle came from the brazier as a small ember shifted deeper into the glowing ash. The accompanying pulse of heat rose in a warm breath, brushing the side of the kettle before dissipating into the upper air. Steam from the tea responded with a slight tremor, lifting in a brief curve before thinning into nothing. Let tonight be simple. He leaned back slightly, allowing his shoulders to relax into the rhythm of the room. The screens glowed faintly with the lantern's muted light, while distant bamboo shadows swayed in slow, drifting arcs. Warmth and coolness mingled in steady patterns, creating a gentle harmony in the quiet space. The cup sat at the center of this stillness. Steam had thinned now, rising only in faint, vanishing wisps. The monk watched as one last thread curled upward, catching the lantern's glow in a soft shimmer before fading. You are safe here. The tea's surface reflected a trembling arc of light, dimming as the warmth slowly withdrew into the clay. The room rested around it, quiet and unbroken. And as the monk sat beside the table, the cup remained in its gentle stillness, holding the last traces of warmth within its darkening hollow. The cup rested where the monk had placed it, its warmth softening into the coolness of the room. Only the faintest trace of steam lifted from its surface now, thin, pale wisps that rose just a finger's height before dissolving. Lantern light shimmered across the darkening tea, forming a trembling ribbon of gold that shifted with every subtle movement of air. Outside, the wind brushed gently through the bamboo, creating soft shadows against the screens. The monk placed his palms flat on the table, feeling the lingering heat radiating from the cup. His fingers rested loosely, unmoving, shaped by the steady quiet of the room. A faint draft slipped beneath the sliding door, drifting past him with a cool, delicate touch. Nothing is required from you. The brazier's flame dimmed to a gentler glow, its heat reaching only the nearest corners of the room. The kettle beside it had grown quiet, its earlier hum replaced by the soft tick of cooling metal. Shadows from the flame swayed across the floorboards in slow, rounded arcs. The mind may rest now. A small wave of warmth rose from the cup, though fainter than before, brushing against the monk's knuckles as he leaned closer. The tea reflected the lantern's glow in a thin, wavering band that softened as the liquid cooled. He watched the surface settle into deeper stillness, its earlier ripples long gone. The room held its calm. Another faint draft passed through the narrow space beneath the door, stirring the air near the table. The movement nudged the remaining steam into fragile spirals that drifted sideways before vanishing. Lantern light flickered at the disturbance, causing the reflection in the cup to tremble. Let tonight be simple. The monk's breath moved slowly, guiding the air around him without disrupting the quiet. His robe shifted with each gentle inhale, the folds catching bits of lantern glow. The warmth from the cup continued to fade, retreating from his palms and settling back into the clay. The The brazier crackled faintly behind him. Only a thread of steam remained now, thin, wavering, almost imperceptible unless caught directly by the lantern's light. It drifted upward, curling once before dissolving into the dimness above the table. "You are safe here." The monk lowered his hands to his lap, watching the cup in its cooling stillness. The tea reflected a soft arc of amber light, trembling slightly as the brazier's flame shifted behind him, and as the room grew quieter, the last thin ribbon of steam rose from the cup, lingering for a single, fragile moment before fading gently into the warm air. The cup sat quietly on the table, its heat fading into the cool air that drifted through the room. Steam no longer rose in clear strands, only a faint blur hovered above the surface, visible only when the lantern flame wavered. The tea had darkened into a still, amber pool, its glow deep and muted. Outside, the bamboo leaves brushed one another with soft, whispering strokes. The monk rested his hands loosely on his knees, his posture calm, his breath steady. The warmth around the cup thinned with each passing moment, collecting in gentle waves that spread and dissolved. Shadows from the lantern moved lightly across his robe, rising and falling with the small shifts of the flame. "Nothing is required from you." A soft crackle came from the brazier as an ember broke apart, collapsing into the bed of ash. The glow dimmed briefly, then steadied, casting low amber light along the floor. The kettle beside it had fully quieted, its surface reflecting the faint shimmer of the room's warmth. "The mind may rest now." The monk leaned forward slightly, letting his gaze settle on the cooling tea. A thin, delicate haze still hovered at its surface, moving in slow, uncertain patterns as the last heat drifted upward. The lantern's reflection curved gently across the cup's inner wall, softened by the cooling steam. The cup felt lighter now, both in warmth and in presence. A draft slipped beneath the sliding door, brushing past the table with a cool, wandering touch. The faint haze above the tea wavered briefly, shifting into fragile spirals before fading entirely. Lantern light flickered at the movement, sending a trembling glow across the cup's chipped rim. "Let tonight be simple." The monk exhaled slowly, guiding the air around him into a calmer rhythm. The shadows on the floor widened, blending into the deeper dimness of the room. The cup absorbed the coolness that settled through the space, its clay returning to the room's gentle chill. Only the faintest memory of warmth remained in the hollow. A small echo of heat lifted from the tea, barely there, only enough to shimmer when the lantern brightened for a breath. It rose a few centimeters, then dissolved before reaching the height of the monk's hands. "You are safe here." He watched the subtle shimmer disappear, leaving the surface of the tea smooth and dark under the lantern glow. The room grew still around the cup, holding the quiet as though pausing for breath. And in that calm moment, the last trace of warmth drifted upward in a thin, fleeting line that vanished before it fully formed. The cup rested in deep quiet now, its warmth nearly gone, absorbed slowly into the surrounding air. The tea inside lay calm and dark, reflecting a soft arc of lantern light that trembled with each shift of the flame. The room held a gentle coolness, where warmth and night met in slow, balanced tones. Outside, bamboo leaves tapped lightly in the breeze, their movements steady and small. The monk placed his hands on the table again, palms open, sensing the faint residue of heat lingering beneath them. The wood felt almost cool now, touched more by the night air than by the brazier's softened glow. Shadows drifted across his fingers, shaped by the wavering lantern light. "Nothing is required from you." A soft exhale left his lips, merging with the still air in front of him. The tea did not stir. Its surface remained unbroken, a quiet pool reflecting the gentle amber glow along its rim. The small chip on the cup cast a curved shadow within the hollow, faint and delicate. "The mind may rest now." The brazier crackled once more, a single ember shifting deeper into the ash. The flame responded with a subtle rise, sending a brief shimmer of warmth across the floor before settling again. The kettle, now fully cooled, offered only the lightest metallic tick as it adjusted to the room's temperature. Its earlier heat had become a memory. The monk leaned closer, his breath traveling gently across the surface of the tea. No steam rose to meet it, not even a wisp, only a thin shimmer of light bending across the liquid. Lantern glow deepened along the curve of the cup, shining softly along the clay's smooth surface. Let tonight be simple. A faint breeze slipped into the room, passing beneath the sliding door and tracing a cool path toward the table. The breeze nudged the lantern flame into a small sway, casting trembling shadows onto the cup and the hand resting near it. The tea remained still, untouched by the shifting air above it. The monk's hands softened, resting quietly in his lap as he observed the gentle interplay of light and shadow. The cooling tea took on a darker, calmer hue, its surface now mirroring the room more than the warmth that once rose from it. You are safe here. A final pulse of light from the lantern shimmered across the tea, creating a thin, wavering reflection that stretched and narrowed into stillness. And as the room settled fully into its quiet, the cup remained in complete calm, holding the dark, unmoving surface that marked the end of its warmth. The cup cooled into the stillness of the evening, its surface dark and steady beneath the lantern's soft glow. No shimmer of steam rose now, only the faint reflection of light that wavered when the flame shifted. The air carried a quiet chill, softened by the last warmth drifting from the brazier. Outside, the bamboo swayed in slow, rhythmic arcs, brushing the night with gentle sound. The monk rested his hands on his knees, his posture loose and unhurried. The lantern's glow pooled around him in warm circles, fading gradually into the dim corners of the room. A faint breeze slipped beneath the sliding door, passing across the floor in a cool ribbon of air. Nothing is required from you. The tea's surface reflected the lantern in a thin, trembling line, no longer disturbed by warmth or movement. Shadows gathered around the cup, deepening its hollow and softening the chipped rim into a quiet curve. The wooden table beneath it cooled slowly, carrying the shifting temperatures of the room. The mind may rest now. The monk leaned slightly toward the cup, not to lift it, but simply to observe the stillness that had settled over it. His breath moved gently across the tea, bending the reflection in small, wavering ripples that faded as quickly as they formed. The room seemed to gather around that calm moment, holding its quiet with steady care. The brazier offered a last small crackle as an ember settled deeper into ash. Its glow dimmed into a muted orange, barely enough to cast shadows across the floor. Warmth lingered near its center, but beyond that, the chill of evening began to reclaim the space. Let tonight be simple. The monk reached out and touched the table near the cup, sensing the coolness spreading through the wood. His fingertips rested there without pressing, feeling the rhythm of the room settle into a gentle stillness. The lantern flame flickered once, casting a soft stretch of light across the cup's rim. He lowered his hand again, letting it rest in his lap as the quiet deepened. The tea inside the cup darkened further as the lantern's glow narrowed into a thinner reflection. The air remained still around it, untouched by steam or warmth. You are safe here. A lone breeze brushed against the screens, shifting the bamboo shadows across the wall in slow, drifting patterns. The room held its gentle calm as the lantern light trembled once more, and in that softened glow, the cup sat unmoving on the table, its surface dark, cool, and quiet beneath the deepening night. The room breathed in soft quiet as the last warmth faded from the cup. Lantern light drifted gently across the floor, thinning as the flame steadied into a modest glow. The tea's surface had grown perfectly still, dark as polished wood beneath the trembling reflections above it. Outside, the night deepened, carrying the faint rustle of bamboo swaying in unhurried arcs. The monk shifted slightly on the cushion, adjusting the fold of his robe without disturbing the stillness around him. Cool air traced a line across the floor, brushing the edge of the table with a light, wandering touch. A faint echo of warmth lingered near the brazier, but only as a memory against the growing chill. Nothing is required from you. He placed one hand near the cup, not touching it, simply sensing the cooled clay through the air above it. The cup's shadow stretched long under the lantern glow, softening at the edges as the flame wavered. The chipped rim cast a small crescent of darkness within the hollow, deep and quiet. The mind may rest now. A gentle tap of bamboo against the screen traveled faintly into the room, the sound softened by the night air. The monk lifted his gaze toward the flickering silhouette, watching its slow movements blend into the dimness. His breath matched the rhythm of the quiet outside, steady and low. The tea remained untouched. The brazier settled further into its evening hush, offering only a faint glow beneath the layer of ash. A thin thread of warmth rose from it, too soft to reach the table but enough to shape a trembling halo near the floor. Lantern light shifted in response, brushing pale gold across the monk's sleeve. Let tonight be simple. He lowered his hand to his lap again, fingers relaxed, posture softened by the gentle pace of the evening. The room held the scent of cedar and faint iron, lingering traces of the warmth that had filled it earlier. The cup sat at the center of this quiet, its presence steady, its surface dark and calm. A breeze moved through the narrow space beneath the sliding door, carrying a cool draft that lifted the edge of the monk's robe. The lantern flickered once, sending a trembling shimmer across the tea's surface before it settled again. You are safe here. The night pressed deeper into the corners of the room, gathering in soft layers around the wooden beams. Lantern glow trembled in a slow, uneven arc, brushing the cup with a thin glimmer of gold, and as the air cooled around it, the cup remained still on the table, holding its quiet pool of tea beneath the deepening shadow. The lantern's flame softened into a smaller, steadier glow, its edges flickering only when the breeze slipped beneath the door. Light gathered in gentle pools across the floor, fading as it reached the far corners of the room. The cup remained where it had cooled, its surface dark and undisturbed except for a narrow line of amber reflection. Outside, bamboo swayed in slow, rhythmic motions, their shadows drifting across the screens. The monk shifted his posture slightly, letting one knee settle more comfortably against the cushion. His robe rested in quiet folds around him, catching the lantern glow in muted tones of gold and shadow. A faint chill moved through the room, blending with the last traces of warmth lingering near the brazier. Nothing is required from you. The tea's surface glimmered softly as the lantern flickered, bending the thin arc of reflected light into trembling shapes. No steam rose now, only the mirror-like stillness of cooled liquid. The chipped rim cast a small, rounded shadow inside the hollow, deepening the cup's quiet presence. The mind may rest now. The monk reached out and touched the table's surface beside the cup. His fingers brushed the wood lightly, tracing the cool grain beneath them. The warmth that once radiated from the cup had fully faded, leaving behind only the room's evening chill. Light from the lantern trembled against his hand. A soft rustle of bamboo drifted through the screens, traveling through the quiet like a slow breath. The monk lifted his gaze slightly, watching the moving shadows shape and reshape along the wall. The night carried a calm weight now, the kind that settled into every corner without hurry. Let tonight be simple. He returned his attention to the cup, letting his eyes follow the subtle shift of lantern light across its curved wall. The reflection on the tea flickered once, then narrowed into a thin glimmer as the flame steadied. The brazier behind him dimmed further, its glow now little more than a warm ember hidden beneath ash. The monk exhaled gently, the sound blending with the faint stir of air moving through the room. The coolness brushed his cheeks, softened by the lingering scent of cedar and iron. You are safe here. A final flicker of lantern light stretched across the tea, its arc wavering before it settled into a calm, narrow shimmer. The room held its breath for a quiet moment, wrapped in the deep stillness of the night. And on the table, the cup sat cool and steady, its surface dark beneath the soft, fading glow. The brazier's warmth dimmed into a faint, reddish ember, its glow soft and low beneath a thin layer of ash. The room gathered coolness around it, folding gently into the spaces where heat had once lingered. Lantern light trembled in narrow arcs across the floor, stretching and shrinking with each quiet movement of the flame. Outside, Bamboo swayed in slow, drifting motions under the deepening night. The monk brought his hands together in his lap, fingers relaxed, palms resting lightly atop one another. His posture softened as he allowed the quiet to shape the room. A faint draft slipped beneath the sliding door, moving across the floor in a cool, measured breath. Nothing is required from you. The cup's surface reflected the lantern's glow in a thin, wavering line, dimmer now, nearly swallowed by the darkness of the tea. No warmth rose from it. No movement disturbed its stillness. The chipped rim cast a gentle, crescent-shaped shadow inside the hollow, blending smoothly into the cooled liquid below. The mind may rest now. The monk leaned slightly forward, watching the play of light and shadow inside the cup. His breath brushed the surface, causing the faintest ripple before settling again into stillness. The wooden table beneath the cup felt cool beneath his fingertips, the warmth of earlier hours long gone. Lantern glow softened along its grain. Outside, a light breeze combed through the bamboo, carrying a hollow rustle into the room. The sound faded almost immediately, absorbed by the night air and the quiet hanging within the walls. Shadows on the screens shifted gently, their outlines swaying in calm, unhurried arcs. Let tonight be simple. The ember in the brazier flickered once, releasing a soft, muted pulse of red light. It glowed for a breath, then dimmed again, settling deeper into the ash. A thread of warmth rose from it, barely enough to touch the space around the monk's feet. The lantern flame answered with a small sway, casting trembling light across the cup's rim. The monk breathed in the cool air, letting it fill the quiet space around him. His robe shifted slightly with the movement, catching a momentary shimmer from the lantern's glow. You are safe here. The ember glowed once more, then settled into a steady, dim pulse beneath the ash. Light from the lantern trembled softly across the tea, forming a narrow band that shimmered before it steadied again. And as the room quieted into deeper stillness, the cup sat cool and unmoving, its dark surface reflecting the fading arc of amber light. The room settled into a deeper quiet as the night pressed softly against the wooden walls. Lantern light trembled in gentle pulses, each movement small, as though conserving the last of its warmth. The tea inside the cup lay dark and perfectly still, reflecting the flame in a thin, wavering arc. Outside, bamboo swayed with a sound so faint it barely reached the room. The monk adjusted the sleeve of his robe, allowing it to fall more loosely along his arm. His hands rested lightly on the table, absorbing the coolness spreading gradually through the wood. The air around him carried only a trace of warmth from the brazier's dying ember. Nothing is required from you. The lantern's glow stretched across the floor in a soft oval of light, its edges blurring into the shadows of the room. The cup's chipped rim caught a faint shimmer each time the flame flickered, casting a small, curved shadow inside the hollow. The tea did not move. It held its silence with a depth that seemed to mirror the night outside. The mind may rest now. The monk leaned forward slightly, observing the tea's surface as it darkened under the cooling air. His breath reached it gently, bending the small ribbon of reflection into a slow, wavering motion. The room responded with its own quiet, settling beans, distant droplets falling from the roof, the steady calm of cooling wood. The cup remained still. A soft stir of air entered beneath the sliding door, brushing the floor with a cool, wandering line. It reached the lantern, causing the flame to sway in a small, delicate arc. Shadows shifted across the table, gliding over the cup and retreating again into the dimness. Let tonight be simple. The ember in the brazier dimmed further, its red glow fading into a faint pulse barely visible beneath the ash. The monk's gaze softened as the room's warmth withdrew, leaving behind the gentle cool of approaching midnight. His hands relaxed further, fingers loose, posture at ease with the quiet. The lantern flickered once more, its light stretching across the tea in a trembling stroke before settling into a steady glow again. The air thickened slightly with cool night drifting through the bamboo outside. You are safe here. The room seemed to pause in its stillness, the lantern's glow hovering softly above the cup. The tea reflected a single thin line of amber light, darkened by the shadows around it. And as the night deepened, the cup sat quietly in its place, holding its dark, unmoving surface beneath the calm of the fading flame. The lantern's flame swayed in a slow, delicate motion as a faint draft moved through the room. Its glow shimmered along the wooden beams above, softening the edges of shadow and warmth alike. The tea inside the cup reflected the shifting light in a thin, trembling line that curved gently with each small flicker. Outside, the bamboo rustled in quiet, measured breaths. The monk rested both hands on the table, his palms settling into the cool grain of the wood. His robe brushed lightly against the floor as he shifted, the sound barely rising above the soft hush of the lantern. A calm chill drifted around him, softened only by the last warmth gathered near the brazier. Nothing is required from you. The cup sat unmoving, its surface dark as still water beneath moonless sky. The chipped rim caught the lantern's glow for a moment, then released it as the flame swayed again. A faint reflection shimmered across the tea, bending and straightening in slow pulses. The mind may rest now. The monk leaned slightly toward the cup, breath quiet, posture softened by the rhythm of the room. His breath brushed the surface of the tea, gently bending the slender arc of light that lay across it. The reflection wavered, then settled again into a calm, narrow stroke. The stillness around him deepened. A small creak came from the wooden wall behind him, the sound of night air settling into the beams. The lantern responded with a brief flicker, sending shadows sweeping across the floor in smooth, slow arcs. The cup glimmered faintly when the light returned, holding the soft glow along its inner curve. Let tonight be simple. The ember in the brazier pulsed faintly beneath ash, offering the last of its reddish warmth to the cooling room. The air above it shimmered for a brief moment, then faded into stillness. The monk's hands relaxed further, fingers slightly curled, resting in calm acceptance of the deepening night. Another faint breeze brushed the screens, carrying the soft rustle of bamboo through the quiet. The lantern responded with a longer sway, stretching the reflected light in the cup into an elongated, quivering arc. You are safe here. When the flames settled again, the reflection narrowed into a trembling line of gold, resting gently on the tea's dark surface. The room held its breath in soft stillness, lantern glow deepening as the night continued its quiet descent. And in the center of that glow, the cup remained steady, its dark surface catching the final, faint vibrations of the lantern's gentle sway. The room rested in a soft hush, its darkness deepened by the lantern's dimming glow. The flame inside swayed gently, sending small pulses of warm light across the table. The cup remained still beneath it, its dark surface reflecting only the thinnest shimmer of gold. Outside, bamboo brushed together in slow, whispering motions that drifted into the quiet. The monk shifted slightly, drawing his robe closer around his knees. The movement created a soft rustle, the sound blending easily into the stillness that filled the room. A cool breath of night air drifted beneath the door, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth and leaves. Nothing is required from you. The lantern flickered once, its glow trembling across the edges of the cup. The reflection on the tea stretched, then collapsed into a narrow ribbon of light. The surface remained unbroken and dark, absorbing the room's deepening quiet. The chipped rim cast a curved shadow that touched the hollow in a gentle arc. The mind may rest now. A subtle creak from the wooden beams overhead traveled downward through the silence. The sound was faint, softened by age and the cool touch of night. The monk lifted his gaze briefly toward the ceiling, then returned it to the cup before him. His breath moved evenly, steady as the dim light that held the room. The brazier gave a final, muted crackle as an ember shifted, sending a soft glow across the floorboards. The warmth barely reached the table now, fading into the thickening cool. Shadows deepened around the kettle, now completely still beside the dying flame. Let tonight be simple. The monk's hands settled comfortably in his lap, fingers resting in relaxed curves. Lantern light brushed the back of his knuckles, casting delicate shadows that rose and fell with each flicker of the flame. The room held a calm weight, shaped by the slow rhythm of night air and drifting bamboo. Another faint breeze passed along the outer walkway, stirring the leaves just enough to produce a soft, drifting sound. It slipped through the narrow gaps in the screens, bringing a gentle whisper into the room. "You are safe here." The lantern steadied again, its glow narrowing into a soft, amber halo that moved slowly across the cup. The tea reflected a single, thin line of trembling light, the rest of its surface falling into quiet shadow. And as the night listened with calm patience, the cup remained unmoving, gathering the silence gently into its dark, peaceful hollow. The lantern's flame steadied into a quiet, modest glow, its light settling softly over the table. Shadows gathered around the cup, deepening its hollow into a calm, dark pool. The tea reflected only the faintest shimmer now, a thin line of amber trembling with each subtle movement of the flame. Outside, the night pressed gently against the walls, carrying the soft rustle of bamboo through the cool air. The monk rested more fully into the cushion, his posture loose, shoulders settling with the slow rhythm of the room. A faint chill drifted across the floorboards, brushing the fabric of his robe in a wandering line. His hands remained still in his lap, warmed only by the memory of the kettle he once held. "Nothing is required from you." The lantern flickered, sending a brief ripple of light across the table. The reflection on the tea wavered in response, stretching and narrowing before returning to its slender, trembling shape. The chipped rim caught a fleeting glimmer, revealing its small curve before fading again into shadow. The mind may rest now. A soft breath escaped the monk, drifting forward and bending the light on the tea's surface. The ripple it created was faint, disappearing almost as soon as it formed. The room answered with its own quiet, settling wood, distant drops falling from the eaves, the low murmur of night wind against the screens. The cup remained still beneath the gathering calm. The ember in the brazier dimmed to a muted glow, nearly swallowed by the ash surrounding it. A momentary pulse of warmth rose from it, touching the air before dissolving into the coolness. Lantern light responded with a soft sway, casting gentle motions along the monk's robe. "Let tonight be simple." He lifted one hand slightly, letting it hover above the cup without touching. The cool air above the tea brushed his skin, carrying none of the earlier warmth. His fingers lowered again, settling quietly into his lap as the room grew more serene. The tea's surface reflected only shadow now, its stillness deep and unbroken. Outside, bamboo moved in a slow, sweeping arc, their rustle echoing faintly through the wooden screens. The breeze that followed slipped lightly into the room, nudging the lantern flame into another soft, trembling sway. "You are safe here." As the glow steadied once more, the reflection in the cup narrowed into a thin, quiet shimmer, barely there, almost swallowed by the night. The room fell into deeper calm, the silence becoming soft and full. And on the table, the cup remained perfectly still, holding the cool, dark tea beneath the gentle weight of the fading lantern light. The lantern's flame narrowed to a thin, wavering point, its glow softening as oil dwindled within. Light spread only a short distance now, settling in gentle halos across the table and floor. The cup rested quietly in that muted glow, its surface dark except for a faint glimmer that flickered with the dying light. Outside, bamboo rustled in slow, rhythmic sweeps, carrying the night's calm through the screens. The monk lowered his gaze, eyelids soft as he breathed into the deepening stillness. His hands rested lightly in his lap, fingers relaxed and open. A cool draft brushed the edge of his robe, moving across the floor in a calm, even flow. "Nothing is required from you." The lantern trembled again, stretching the thin arc of reflected light across the tea. The cup's chipped rim caught a brief glint before releasing it to shadow. No warmth rose from the tea, only the room's cool air settling over its surface. The mind may rest now. A quiet creak sounded in the wooden beams above, softened by years of settling and the slow weight of night. The monk lifted his head slightly, listening without moving. The sound faded as gently as it came, dissolving into the quiet that pooled in every corner of the room. Shadows drifted across the floor. The brazier offered one last faint pulse of red, nearly hidden beneath ash. The glow rose for a heartbeat, then dimmed into a dull ember. Lantern light brushed against it, catching the faintest shimmer before fading again. Let tonight be simple. The monk leaned forward just slightly, observing how the lantern glow flickered along the cup's rim. The tea reflected the thin light in a narrow, trembling line, bending whenever the flame swayed. His breath moved softly across the table, creating a subtle ripple in the reflection before it settled once again into stillness. Outside, bamboo leaves shifted in a low murmur as a breeze passed gently through them. The night carried that sound into the room in delicate, trailing strokes, barely disturbing the quiet within. The monk's robe moved in a soft wave as the breeze touched it. "You are safe here." The lantern flickered once more, the flame thinning into a small, uncertain glow. The reflection in the tea narrowed into the faintest shimmer, like a line of light slowly retreating into darkness. And as the room embraced the deeper cool of night, the cup remained where it was, holding its dark, unmoving surface beneath the fading lantern flame. The lantern flame fluttered in a small, trembling arc, pulling its glow inward before stretching outward again. Each movement cast soft, wavering shadows across the table, brushing the cup with fading warmth. The tea reflected only a sliver of light now, a thin, fragile line that wavered with the lantern's slowing pulse. Outside, bamboo swayed in gentle whispers under the deep night sky. The monk rested motionlessly on his cushion, hands folded loosely atop his lap. His breath rose and fell in long, quiet waves, shaping the room with a rhythm that barely disturbed the cool air. The robe around his shoulders settled deeper into its folds, gathering the chill of the night. "Nothing is required from you." The lantern flickered again, sharply this time, casting a sudden ripple across the surface of the tea. The narrow arc of light trembled, stretched, and then shrank into a dimmer glimmer. The chipped rim of the cup caught a brief flash before falling back into shadow. The mind may rest now. A soft creak passed through the floorboards beneath him, the old wood adjusting to the cooling air. The sound faded almost instantly, absorbed by the thick quiet that filled the room. The monk lifted his gaze toward the lantern, watching the flame's gentle struggle to hold its shape. The brazier offered the faintest glow, barely more than a memory of warmth resting under a thin veil of ash. The ember shifted once, then settled into complete stillness. Lantern light stretched toward it in a muted amber glow, then retreated as the flame dimmed further. Let tonight be simple. A cool breeze traced its path across the floor, brushing lightly against the monk's robe and nudging the lantern flame into another small sway. Shadows danced along the cup's curved wall, rising briefly before settling again. The tea remained motionless, dark as the night itself. The monk exhaled gently, the breath passing across the table and bending the fading reflection in the cup. His eyes softened as he watched the light tremble, knowing the flame would soon fall into its final quiet. "You are safe here." The lantern gave one last flutter, a delicate shake of golden light that shimmered across the tea's surface. The narrow line of reflection rippled once, stretched thin, and then dimmed into a faint, trembling glow. And as the flame began its slow descent toward darkness, the cup remained still, holding the last reflections of a night settling fully into quiet. The lantern flame shrank into a small, wavering ember of gold, barely lifting itself above the wick. Its glow stretched thinly across the table, reaching the cup with only the faintest touch of warmth. The tea's surface reflected a dim, trembling sliver of light, like a memory of brightness slipping deeper into shadow. Outside, the bamboo moved in slow, unbroken sweeps, their whispers softened by the cool night air. The monk softened his posture, shoulders lowering as he settled more fully into the cushion. The fabric of his robe brushed gently against the floor, blending with the quiet that filled the room. A cool draft drifted across the wooden boards, touching his hands with a soft, muted chill. Nothing is required from you. The lantern flickered twice, small, tentative motions, before steadying into a pale, hesitating glow. Its light thinned across the cup's rim, revealing the curve of the chipped edge in a momentary shimmer. The tea inside remained unmoving, its surface dark as still water beneath a moonless sky. The mind may rest now. A distant creak traveled through the wooden beams overhead, the sound low and softened by time. It moved like a sigh through the rafters, then faded into the room's deepening quiet. The monk's gaze followed the sound for a moment, before returning to the cup, which held its stillness as though waiting with gentle patience. The brazier had cooled entirely, offering no glow except a faint gray hint of the ember buried beneath ash. Heat no longer rose from it, only the scent of cedar lingered faintly in the air. The lantern's dimming light traced a thin shape across the brazier's metal rim before fading back toward the table. Let tonight be simple. The monk lifted one hand slightly, his fingers hovering over the table without touching. Cool air brushed his skin in delicate strokes, carrying the faintest scent of night rain from beyond the walkway. His hand lowered again, the motion slow, joining the quiet rhythm of the room. Outside, bamboo leaves shifted in gentle arcs as a quiet breeze passed through. Their shadows moved softly across the screen, subtle shapes that blended into the dim lantern glow. You are safe here. A final flutter touched the lantern flame, stretching it into a thin golden thread before it gathered inward again. The tea reflected this last shimmer, bending the light into a trembling curve that clung to the surface before dimming into near darkness. And as the lantern hovered on the edge of its quiet end, the cup sat calmly beneath it, still and deep under the fading glow. The lantern's flame dipped low, shrinking into a faint, unsteady glow that hovered weakly above the wick. Its light barely reached across the table, touching the cup with a soft, fading shimmer. The tea inside reflected only a thin glint of gold, trembling as the flame struggled to hold shape. Outside, bamboo whispered in long, gentle motions beneath the dark sky. The monk's breathing grew slower, each exhale merging smoothly with the cool air around him. His hands rested loosely in his lap, fingers softened by the deep quiet settling through the room. A thin breeze slipped beneath the sliding door, brushing the floor in a cool, gliding ribbon. Nothing is required from you. The lantern flickered once, sharply, like a final stretch of light, casting a trembling wave across the cup's rim. The chipped edge caught the glow for a brief moment before releasing it back into the dimness. The tea remained still, its dark surface absorbing the soft shadows that grew around it. The mind may rest now. A gentle creak passed through the wooden beams, quiet and slow, like the room exhaling into the night. The monk shifted slightly, adjusting the fold of his robe as the air cooled further. Lantern glow touched his sleeve just long enough to reveal its texture before dimming again. The quiet deepened, steady and unbroken. The brazier held no warmth now, only the faint outline of its curved form in the near dark. Ash settled in soft layers, untouched by even the smallest ember. The lantern's fading glow brushed its rim once more, then softened into the shadows pooling nearby. Let tonight be simple. The monk lowered his gaze to the tea, observing the last visible thread of light trembling across its surface. His breath reached it gently, causing the reflection to waver in a slow, delicate curve before settling again. The room, wrapped in cooling night, held the moment with patient stillness. Outside, a breeze swept lightly through the bamboo, sending a soft wave of rustling sound through the screens. Shadows drifted across the walls in gentle arcs, moving with the easiness of night wind. You are safe here. The lantern's flame fluttered one final time, flickering into a thin, wavering thread of light. It brightened once, then dimmed into a fragile glow that hovered on the edge of extinguishing. And as the last shimmer stretched across the tea's surface, the cup remained quiet and unmoving, waiting beneath the lantern's final breath of warmth. The lantern's glow thinned into a pale, wavering shimmer, barely bright enough to reach the cup on the table. The flame trembled, as if weighing its final moments, sending faint pulses of gold into the cooling room. The tea reflected only a soft glint, a shifting trace of light that wavered like a distant memory. Outside, bamboo swayed in slow arcs beneath the deep quiet of the night. The monk remained still on his cushion, his breath deepening into long, unhurried rhythms. His robe draped softly around him, gathering the cool air that drifted through the room. A gentle draft moved beneath the sliding door, brushing along the floor with a calm, wandering touch. "Nothing is required from you." The lantern flickered, once, twice, casting a trembling glow along the cup's rim. The chipped edge caught the fading light, offering a brief, curved shimmer before it faded back into shadow. The tea no longer changed beneath the glow. Its surface lay dark and still, reflecting only the faintest suggestion of warmth. The mind may rest now. A soft creak rose from the floorboards as the night settled deeper into the wood. The sound traveled gently across the room, then dissolved as the lantern dimmed further. The monk's eyes softened toward the cup, watching how the last strands of light shaped its quiet form. Shadows gathered around it, calm and unbroken. The brazier, long cooled, sat in stillness, its ash untouched by even the faintest ember. Lantern light brushed against its rim in a thin, uneven arc before collapsing into shadow. The room held the remnants of warmth as a whisper, nothing more. "Let tonight be simple," the monk exhaled, the breath slow and steady, carrying a slight cloud of warmth into the cooling air. His gaze remained gentle, his posture softened by the quiet that filled the room. The lantern's glow dimmed in response, its flame curling inward as though preparing to withdraw. Outside, bamboo leaves stirred again, creating a soft, distant murmur that brushed against the screens. Their shadows drifted along the wall in delicate patterns, guided by the breeze. "You are safe here." The lantern gave another small flicker, stretching a faint ribbon of gold across the tea before pulling back into a fragile glow. The light trembled, then steadied weakly, hovering on the edge of darkness. And as the room grew quieter still, the cup remained in calm stillness, holding its dark pool beneath the lantern's thinning glow. The lantern's flame folded inward, thinning into a quiet ember of gold that clung delicately to the wick. Its glow barely reached the cup now, casting only the faintest curve of light across the dark surface of the tea. The room settled into a soft hush, shaped by the cool breath of midnight drifting through the wooden beams. Outside, bamboo swayed in long, slow arcs, whispering against the night. The monk breathed steadily, each inhale smooth, each exhale soft enough to blend into the stillness around him. His hands rested gently in his lap, relaxed and open, receiving the quiet without expectation. A light draft moved beneath the sliding door, brushing the floor in a cool ripple. "Nothing is required from you." The lantern flickered once, a final shimmer that stretched thin along the rim of the cup. The chipped edge caught a faint glow before surrendering it to shadow. The tea remained calm and unmoving, its surface smooth as polished stone beneath the fading light. The mind may rest now. The monk lifted his gaze for a moment, watching the glow as it struggled, then softened again. The flame grew smaller, shrinking toward the wick in a delicate tremor. Shadows deepened at the edges of the room, rising gently as the light receded. The quiet held everything. A soft creak moved through the floorboards, settling into silence almost as soon as it appeared. The brazier sat dark and cool, its ash resting in undisturbed layers. Lantern light brushed it faintly, then dimmed again, leaving only a soft gray outline. "Let tonight be simple." The monk leaned slightly toward the table, his breath drifting across the cup. The faintest ripple touched the tea's surface, bending the last thread of reflected light before it stilled again. The lantern's flame faltered, bowing inward with a gentle tremor. Outside, bamboo whispered in a slow, swaying rhythm, brushing shadows across the screen in soft, fluid arcs. The breeze carried a cool hush into the room, lifting the edge of the monk's robe before settling again. "You are safe here." The lantern gave its final flicker, one small, fluttering breath of gold, before the flame withdrew entirely, leaving the wick faintly glowing in the dimness. The last line of light across the tea softened into darkness, and as the room embraced the quiet of night, the cup sat perfectly still, holding its calm, dark surface beneath the lantern's last light.